Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, Prasa's Group CEO Zolani Matthews has been placed on precautionary suspension after he was appointed in February this year, and Prasa had not had a Group CEO since the departure of Lucky Montana in 2015. The agency has been experiencing many challenges that become pronounced at the height of state capture, which was marked by a 4.1 billion rand irregular expenditure, as well as fruitless and wasteful expenditure of 541 million rand. Political analyst and Wits School of Governance lecturer Sandile Swana joins us now to share his perspectives on this issue. Sandile, always lovely to have you. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you so much, Leanne, and good morning to your listeners, to your viewers.
So there was controversy surrounding the appointment of Zolani Matthews at Prasa in February. I mean, including the fact that in terms of age, he was over the South African retirement policy age. So talk to me about exactly who is Zolani Matthews?
If we were to use street language to define ZK Matthews, we are talking here about the political royalty of the liberation struggle. These are the descendants of ZK Matthews, the struggle stalwart. So you notice that he has been placed in key strategic positions in South Africa. Among those positions would have been as a councillor of ICASA very recently, shortly before he was appointed CEO of Prasa. So he didn't serve his 4-year term as a councillor of ICASA. He was appointed chairperson of the Harbours Authority, Harbours and Ports Authority in South Africa. So he has been hobnobbing with the political elites and coming from a family of the likes of Naledi Pandor and so on, who are, quote unquote, entitled to lead everything that needs to be led in South Africa.
So we hear yesterday and over the weekend coming out that he's been suspended, and it's alluded that his suspension has to do with a security breach, and something along the lines is that he's got a UK citizenship which he did not disclose. So, I mean, is this grounds or reason for suspension? Perhaps there's more to it that you could talk to us about.
Look, actually, we can't be too casual about this, Leanne. This country's security has largely collapsed as we speak today. We know that in the era that we live in, for instance, there is nations that have got full cyber war capability. And this capability has been there for quite a long time, where people can actually silence your communications in a country before attacking. Israel has used those technologies in the wars in the Middle East and so on. So when you appoint people to be councillors of ICASA, which controls the communications in this country, you do need to make sure that those people have got clearance, security clearance, appropriate security clearance. Secondly, if you appoint a person to chair the ports and harbours of South Africa, if you like, which is the entry point of all sorts of things into the country, that person should not be a person who can just end up facilitating the entrance of all kinds of contraband, drugs, and all sorts of things through the ports of South Africa. And obviously illegal persons as well. So if that person can be easily captured or compromised, it's a problem. So the question of examining the security records of Matthews, ZK Matthews, needed to have been done a number of times, given that his appointment was even taken to cabinet and approved by cabinet in February 2021. So yes, it is clear to us that in trying to solve the problems at Prasa and elsewhere in the state, our cabinet has not yet reached the stage of actually solving the problems more than appointing cadres who will continue the cover-up.
You know, one has to look at, I suppose, the bigger picture of what's actually happening. And, you know, Prasa's instability over the years, like most government entities, is a major issue. And, you know, Zolani Matthews obviously having a very big job on his hands coming into that position. So I understand the sensitivity and the what you're talking to. But again, now having a CEO go with Prasa in the situation that it's in, where does this leave Prasa now? And, you know, getting to the issues around Prasa, let's talk to the problems and how we try and resolve them.
Okay. Now, the problems at Prasa, there are problems that the public is experiencing relative to Prasa. As an example, the number of trips undertaken by Prasa has declined by 76%. You know, more than 3/4 of the trains are no longer, or train trips are no longer available. In the main line at in Cape Town, at Longlanga, Khayelitsha, and so on, people have been allowed by the present government to build shacks on the main line. About 1,000 families have built shacks along the main line and on Prasa properties. When we grew up in this country, the railway reserve was holy ground. You could not be found fidgeting there. The 3,000 security personnel employed by Prasa have been removed and terminated because the allegation is that they've been actually improperly appointed. So the railway reserve, the rails themselves, the power supply into the power supply lines, electricity supply lines into the railway lines, the stations, all of that is being vandalized and unguarded. And part of the story was that Matthews would then come in and actually improve the security at some kind of security credentials that he was bringing on board. And that has not happened. We were told that Matthews would come in and bring in an improvement on governance, but you discover that in his own employment application form, he falsified the form. And the company, as we know today, is operating under a disclaimer. We don't know what the state of the books of Prasa are today. At the same time, the Competition Tribunal has said, basically, in essence, Prasa should be dismantled in the manner that Eskom is being dismantled. That the metro rail should be handed over to the metros like the city of Cape Town, and so on and so forth. So the company now is actually headed in the direction of investment as we speak today.
Yeah, yeah. You know, there was a newspaper article doing the rounds yesterday, and of course it was in the city press, where they were saying that there's a rumor doing the rounds that Fikile Mbalula and Matthews do not see eye to eye. And this is at the heart of what's actually going on behind the scenes. And this, you know, this again brings into question you implement these CEOs, you bring them in, and do we allow them enough freedom to try and come in and do the job that they've been hired to do without interference? And again, I'm speaking on allegations. We don't know. This was just an article that was out in the city press. Do you find that's still the case? Because I mean, when we look back to the state capture years, these were major issues, and Prasa is one of those entities that was at the heart of it, with the amount of billions that was siphoned out of Prasa. So letting a CEO do their job without interference?
That is unlikely to happen. That is why a lot of these so-called CEOs who are appointed into this state entities, including Zolani Matthews himself, are actually, these are trusted cadres of the African National Congress who must do their job within certain mandates that do not incriminate the ruling African National Congress further, because unfortunately the irregular transactions are already in the records. That is why today you find that a corporate of the size of Prasa can come up with a story of a disclaimer from the Auditor General. When they give you a disclaimer, it means basically there are no records for the Auditor General to examine. And as I was reading the public protector reports about Prasa, It's an organization where they just blatantly refuse to supply their records to the public protector, even though there were subpoenas. So Mbalula and Matthews are comrades to each, relative to each other. These are comrades of the same liberation movement. They belong to one organization. So when you say they are fighting, what is it that they can be fighting over other than the continuation of criminality?
You know, it just begs the question, because again, I read a little bit further into what they're saying, is that Matthews has, according to targets that were set to him, he's gone way and above the call of duty, but that's according to the targets that were set to him from Prasa. He is going and he's doing that. There's a lot to clean up when we look at Prasa. Internal fighting within boards and top management, allegations of huge contracts that were corrupt, more revelations at the Zondo Commission. This is a big thing, and still nobody arrested. And the attempt to try and clean it up just seems to not be working. And I mean, where does this leave the entity? Because you need something like Prasa to be active, because the citizens are the ones that are being failed here. But there's just so much infighting happening. How do you get to the root of this?
One of the issues that you will be aware of course, is that some of the provinces, including the Western Cape, have been demanding that the metro rail services be handed over to the province. You will know that in great cities like London, Paris, and so on, metro rail is actually a city function. It is not a national function. And the recommendations of the Competition Commission is that we go that route. So in solving this problem, there is a need, even if people have to go to court, to apply for instance, for the metro rail in the Western Cape to be handed over to the province. Those people of the Western Cape, I can assure you, within a shorter space of time, will start enjoying proper metro rail services, if that is done. Where you cannot be sure is in places like Gauteng, because what has been said is metro rail can be merged with the Gautrain, and the Gauteng province, the city region of Gauteng, can run its own metro rail covering Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, and so on. There is a chance that they might succeed and run it properly. But right now, the risk is so concentrated at the head office of Prasa, and probably we are at the point where that needs to be dissolved completely, because the amount of crime that is on the books and recorded and continuing, it means it's impossible.
Yeah.
Bear in mind that just one little statistics, that at the moment, the statistics I've seen are saying that only 3% of the long-distance trains are leaving or arriving on time, right? Only 3%.
Sure.
Now, there is a comparables, and the ambition level is to take that from 3% to 50%. But how do you get to 3%? And you look at the local trains. The local trains are probably in their 40s in terms of the average leaving on time or arriving on time. And they are trying to get that back to 85%. And within living memory, within a very short space of time, trains were actually leaving and arriving on time in South Africa.
Imagine those days. And not to mention the vandalism, because that's another thing that is so blatantly obvious. Empty stations along the way that have been vandalized, railway tracks that are almost non-existent. It's devastating when you look at it. And the worst part about it is there's actually a security company on the payroll when we have a look and see who is actually making money out of all of this. I mean, security companies on Prasa's payroll, when you're looking at skeletons of stations, I mean, that is just such a blatant, obvious issue.
These are issues, the security of our transport sector right now as a whole, it's a problem. I'm sure you would have read the papers talking about the security on the fuel pipelines from the coast. That people are tapping fuel on the fuel pipeline, and these pipelines have been supplying fuel to the Vaal, to the Transvaal for a long time without any of the security problems. And the trains, the security, railway security and transport security in South Africa today And when Balula took over, we were told that drones are going to be all over and all sorts of things, and that Matthews is a security expert. But at the moment, the passengers on the trains are not secure. The line itself, the physical rails are not secure. People are taking it and selling it for scrap metal. People are taking the electrical wires and selling them for scrap metal, etc., etc. There is no security there. And I want to believe that the days where we're trying to rescue Prasa are probably over. And what needs to be done now is that hand over this thing to the metros and let them run their own railways, because Prasa is the home of in-depth corruption. Unfortunately, the ruling party has been at the center of that corruption, as Pomolipe highlighted.
Yeah, well, that's there, and that's where we have to leave it, Sandile. But I mean, when you look at the years of instability at Prasa, you've got so many role players in there. You've got the government, you've got the ministers there, you've got the board, internal management, and then it just appears that there's no responsibility taken by anybody. So that's an issue we're watching very closely. That's what's happening at Prasa. And of course, talking to us was Sandile Swana, who of course is at the Wits School of Governance. He's a lecturer there. Right, that leads us up to 7 o'clock.